In June 2024, my coaching role at the Notts Gymnastics Academy is coming to an end. I've now been coaching for 3 years and I'm currently in the process of acquiring my level 3 coaching qualification. The opportunity to work alongside Josh Champion, who I consider to be my coaching mentor, has been invaluable. I've made mistakes, learned some incredible lessons and experienced real joy in my young coaching journey so far. I hope to continue learning and developing as a young coach moving forward, and this is my story. So today I'm going to talk about coaching and my experience so far. I've now been coaching for 3 years. And when I think back to my time as a gymnast and around the age of like 25, when I started to think and almost transition mentally and psychologically into life after gymnastics and imagine what that would look like. And I started to, I guess without knowing it, begin to think about coaching and working with the younger athletes in the gym. I had a very different idea of what coaching would be. At the time, I was single. I didn't really have too many responsibilities. And I had this kind of romantic idea that when I retired from gymnastics, if I wanted to go into coaching, and I certainly didn't know that that's what I wanted to do at the time, that I would go and travel. I'd go abroad. So my plan was to go out to Japan and coach for 6 months there. Really like integrate in their system, try and learn the language, learn the culture, just watch, observe, learn as much as I possibly could. And then I had this conversation with Sergey of going to Russia and doing the same thing, spending 6 months in Russia and learning Russian gymnastics, that Soviet style, and kind of blending the two together. And, you know, I felt that if I was going to go down the traditional route, I wanted to do it properly and I wanted to spend that time, you know, almost like going away and living like, you know, doing the monk life and that kind of thing. I wanted to really like, it's almost like method acting. I want to really like live in it, feel it, experience it, and take in all that knowledge. Because, you know, I feel like a lot of the time when you become a young coach, you jump straight in at the deep end and it's very difficult to have, you know, that time to grow and learn lots of things. You know, I would recommend to all young coaches that they travel around more, like take those opportunities. Even now there's coaches in the gym at Notts and, you know, I saw an opportunity recently. Some of the top coaches within the country are doing a day at Liverpool at the National Sports Centre where you can go along and learn and there's going to be seminars. And I kind of like gave him a nudge and I was like, look, you should go. Like, how many opportunities do you get in a year to go and learn things, especially off these top level coaches? Even if you go for the whole weekend and you take one thing away that stays with you for the rest of your coaching journey, like it's worthwhile. So that was my idea, this romantic idea of going abroad, spending time in Japan, learning about Japanese gymnastics, spending time in Russia, learning about Russian gymnastics and blending the two, I guess, and then coming back. And the idea was to then work alongside Sergey. Sergey would be my mentor and I would start my coaching journey and, you know, almost in many ways walk the path that Sergey walked throughout his career. But and around the same time, I started asking the right questions, I think. You know, I wasn't just doing the gymnastics for the sake of doing it. I knew that Sergey was telling me the right things to do technically, but I didn't understand why, and I started to ask why a lot more. And when I asked why, or if a younger gymnast came up to me and said, Sam, how do I do this? Or what's the reason I should be doing this? You know, am I trying to push a little bit more with my hands on the high bar? Or am I trying to hang a little bit more? What about my timing? If I didn't understand what I was telling someone, I would then go and ask Sergey, why am I doing this? Like, can you explain it to me? So I wanted to really understand it deeply. And I think when you get to that point as an athlete where you do ask those bigger questions and you're trying to understand the reason why you're doing things on a deeper level, that's probably the first step towards becoming a coach, because you're trying to really understand the inner workings of how the mechanism of the skill that you're teaching. And, you know, that's where it probably started for me, asking those questions, talking to Sergey and watching him as well, like watching him not just being there in the gym, but being really present and like watching what he was telling other gymnasts, you know. So like a young gymnast, how is he communicating that information and how's that different, you know, how's that different coaching a 14-year-old to it is like a 21-year-old or 22-year-old. I think I was already like trying to take this in, and I was very good at like people watching in a gym, sitting back. You know, I'd often sit on my green table bench that was next to the high bar, and I'd just watch how things were going on, watch the conversations people were having, the communications, trying to learn when somebody was maybe having a rough time in the gym, asking Sergey, how do you approach that? Like, how are you trying to communicate with them? You know, should they really be pushing their gymnastics right now when they've got things going on outside of the gym? So I was trying to like take in all this information. And one thing that I really did towards the end was me and Sergey became a bit of a double team. It was like good cop, bad cop, to the point at which I remember some of the lads would say that, the last couple of years in my career, I'd only train Monday to Friday, I have Saturdays off, and they'd say, Sam, Sergey's completely different on a Saturday. He's so much stricter and he's a lot harsher. But when you're in the gym, you kind of level him out. And I think we work together really well as a team. So, if one day Sergey was coming in and he'd focus more on like the technical stuff, I'd come in and, put my arm around him or give him a boost or, give him that positive feedback they maybe weren't getting from Sergey, and then it would work vice versa. So there'd be times where I'd be really heavily working on like the technical stuff, and Sergey would come in and, give them that motivation and the inspiration that they kind of needed. So I think I think the first steps into coaching started way before I became a coach and decided that I was going to go down that road. And, I still don't really know the answer of whether or not I am doing that. I've kind of ended up using gymnastics as the vehicle, and the majority of the work that I'm doing now is either storytelling or coaching. I don't think you'd say that my gymnastics coaching is the traditional type of gymnastics coaching. I'm kind of here, there and everywhere. That very much suits me. And I think as my career did come to an end, like every athlete or anybody that's retiring, I did have that limbo period where I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. At that point, I'd already tried a different job. I'd worked a more traditional 9 to 5 that was in construction. And, I realized very quickly that's not for me. And I had a period of about 3 or 4 months leading up to Christmas after I retired. I retired in September, where I continued with that job. And then as I got close to Christmas, I think, I'd always imagined that after gymnastics, I'd want a clean break from it. I'd want to go away from it. But I had this chat with somebody in the gym yesterday. It was a girl. She's a student. She's been in education her whole life. And I think actually when you are transitioning out of a sport that you've been in, that familiarity is quite comforting, and actually I think that can help you. And I think it doesn't mean that you have to, that's your decision, you're going to do that for the rest of your life. And I said that to her yesterday. I said, be flexible, be open, like try something, see how you feel about it. I think it's very important to try things to know as much as like trying something to find out if that's what you want to do, you can learn very quickly that isn't what I want to do. And then you've closed that door. You don't need to make that mistake again. You can focus on the next thing and you can pivot quite quickly. And so I think when it came to that Christmas time, when Josh, had a conversation with me, we went for a coffee, and he basically said, look, I'd like to offer you a job. I remember firstly feeling very valued for the first time in a very long time when it came to my gymnastics. I hadn't felt like that as an athlete for a long time. I hadn't felt valued in the system that I was in. Certainly I came to the end of my career, and look, the competition that I competed in at the end, it was amazing. Everybody was incredibly supportive. They said very kind things, but, very quickly that next morning it was done, right? And there was no one there to kind of say, hey, Sam, what are you interested in? What do you want to go into next? We're going to help you. We're going to support you. Do you maybe want to become a coach? That just wasn't there. And I think when Josh offered me that opportunity and he basically said, look, I really value your knowledge, your experience, your expertise. I'd like you to come and work at the gym. I had that conversation with Connie initially, and it was kind of like, whoa, we looked at the hours, because I think that sounds great on paper. Yeah, I can be a gymnastics coach, and, this is going to be great. I'm going to love it. But the reality of that and what it means, the impact that has on your life that's tough. And I was a very different person at 28 when I'd just retired than I was at 25 before I met Connie, right? Like, I was single. I had a lot of flexibility. Whereas at that point, we'd bought a house. We were planning to go traveling at some point. We were thinking about marriage and kids and what our lives would look like. And all of a sudden, working from 1 p.m. till 8 o'clock every night, Monday to Friday, and then all day 9 till 4 or 5 on a Saturday, that's not very conducive with what our plans were moving forward. So, yeah, there was a little bit of friction in the beginning in terms of whether I felt that I could take that opportunity and try it and it was going to work with like our life outside of the gym. But I gave it a go, and credit to her, Connie was like, look, you should go and try this. I think you need to, otherwise you're never going to know. And she obviously didn't want to be the person that was stopping me do that if it was something I was going to enjoy. And I think those first 8 months were just incredible for my development as a young coach. And I would encourage any young coach that starts out to follow a similar path. And the path that I took was that, ultimately my speciality and my niche was going to be in men's gymnastics, but I needed to learn how to coach. In many ways, Sergey had taught me what to coach, but I needed to build my own philosophy on how I was going to approach that and what it meant to me and what I wanted to get out of it. So the technical side was, I'm not going to say sorted, because you never stop learning. You're constantly developing, and techniques and things change all the time. But in terms of like what I should coach, I knew that because I'd done gymnastics at a high level for 20 years. But how to coach, how to communicate with young people, how to get the best out of them, how to work in a team, how to plan, how to organize. These were all things that I needed to develop. And for me, having the opportunity to work with a complete array of different gymnastics abilities and ages, different genders, was just an incredible opportunity. I look back at that and, I learned so much, and I made so many mistakes, and I was given the freedom to make those mistakes because a lot of the time, the level of gymnastics I was working with was very low. So we're working on forward rolls and stretch jumps and cartwheels, and you do that for 8 months, you find out very quickly whether or not you enjoy coaching and you love the art form of teaching somebody, a young person, to do something brand new and giving them the best possible chance to be successful in whatever they're learning to do. And I think, those 8 months of working across the spectrum of gymnastics levels and abilities was invaluable. I think some of the early mistakes I probably made, I think one of the big ones was, technically I was very rigid in the way that, and I still am, I have these core fundamentals. And one of those, to get quite specific, is that, when you're tumbling on floor and you're going backwards, I try really hard to keep the gymnast to keep their head still. You need like an anchor point. You need to be able to, this needs to be the same every single time, because if I throw my head backwards or to the left or to the right, I kind of lose my spatial awareness. And you need to know, right, my takeoff, it should be the same. Every time you take off backwards, your head should be in. It's like a key fundamental, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But, what I had failed to understand is that as a coach, context is very important. And knowing your gymnasts, knowing the work they've done previously, knowing their personalities, their characters, how they react to different feedback is super important. And I'd walked across the gym, and I don't think I was even in the main gym at the time. I was in the secondary gym, which is for the recreational side. And again, I was teaching one of these groups who were just doing forward roll stretch jumps. And I walked through the gym, and there was a boy on track, and he was in like a club group, so not the advanced group, kind of like the middle level of gymnastics. And he did a somersault with his head out. And I said to him when I walked past, I was like, you need to really try and keep your head in. Keep your head still when you take off. Now, I'm not his coach, and I hadn't seen the work he'd done. And this gymnast, I'd imagine, had done this somersault with his head out hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. I've come in and tried to change something very fundamental that is very difficult to do. So he's gone and tried to do this, took off, panicked in the air, and essentially landed on his face on the track and almost nearly hurt himself. And so that was a big learning lesson for me. Technically, I was correct in the way I'm trying to teach it him, but I can't just come in without any context and just throw that off like a flippant comment. That isn't fair on the gymnast, and it's not fair on his coach also. And so that was a big learning lesson for me, to make sure that if you are going to give feedback, it's got to be purposeful, and you need to have that context and be very careful of the type of feedback you're giving and giving it at the right times. A perfect example of that now is that I've been working with the top level, the top end of gymnastics for the last 6 months. And some of these guys have got big competitions coming up. If all of a sudden the week before a competition, I'd start telling them about a completely new concept or a new technique that they've never tried before, that could massively impact their performance at the weekend. So yeah, you can see how it can be very, there's a lot of pressure on that. And you've got to make sure that everything that you're saying, you've really thought about it, and you're making sure it's the right thing at the right time, and you're communicating well with, for me, one of the hardest things about what I do, working on a Thursday, is that I need to be very careful that I'm the information and the general technical feedback that Josh is giving to those gymnasts, I'm not steering too far away from that. We need to be working together. There needs to be like a common goal, and I guess the achievement, what we're trying to achieve, needs to be very much the same. We need to be in line, and so that was a big mistake I made early on in my coaching career over those 8 months. And another group that I would work with was a girls group, and I loved that because I got 6 or 7 hours. I think it was on a Wednesday. And again, one of the great things about that early development in those 8 months that I spent, I was given a lot of freedom. I was given a lot of freedom to make mistakes. I was given a lot of freedom to try my own ideas. I felt very empowered by the coaches there, specifically with the girls. I was asked to teach a lot of forwards tumbling and work a lot on the fast track, and they kind of gave me the girls and said, Sam, go and do what you do, which was amazing. I was able with those young girls as well to practice a lot of supporting and get quite hands-on. With a lot of the boys group I was working with at the time, either their gymnastics level wasn't high enough that I didn't need to really support them to do too much, or I was supporting them for very basic skills. With the boys, on a Thursday, I was essentially assisting Josh, and it was very much just technical feedback. But the girls, they were kind of 8 years old, they were doing relatively high-level gymnastics, they needed a lot of hands-on supporting, so that's where I could really get stuck in and work on the art of supporting, because that's a very difficult skill, and you have to learn that, and it's quite scary when you're starting out as a young coach. And there was a young girl on the A-bars that I worked with, and she was doing a blind full. So you do a giant and you essentially do a full turn on your hands. First time supporting, I never supported it before. Asked the coach to demonstrate for me so I could see it. She demonstrated. I didn't really see it because it happens so fast when you're supporting. First set was fine, and the second set, essentially I dropped her. She fell off the bars, smashed herself on the side. You know, she cried, she was hurt a little bit, and she landed on the mat. And I obviously felt terrible about it, and that kind of knocked my confidence a little bit as well. I'm trying to think about what everyone says, and I'm trying to rationalise in my head, right, I probably should get up and do this again. I shouldn't leave it at that one. I should make sure I'm not too nervous of supporting, and I shouldn't let this put me off supporting in the future. But at the time, and I've told this story before, one of the coaches that was there and was supporting me and mentoring me, she told me, like, she had been told by her mentor, if you drop a kid, never let them know that it's your fault. And I thought about that for a long time, and I was like, wow, do I want to do that? Do I want to be the coach that pretends that it was the gymnast's mistake, it wasn't my mistake? And I kind of, from that moment, decided, no, like, whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, but my approach is going to be, I'm just going to be really honest. And so that was great. So from that mistake that I made, I learned that I need to really always push myself to practice supporting, even if I get nervous. And I used that in these last 6 months, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, from that, I realized, wow, having a young gymnast in your hands is a massive responsibility, and the only way you get better at that is by practicing, and you're going to have to accept that you're going to make some mistakes. One of my coaches, that's a good friend of mine, said you kind of have to accept you're going to break some eggs. Like, that's going to happen. You're going to drop kids. Once you can accept that, like, you'll be okay then. It's part of the learning process. And gymnastics is a very unique sport because there are not many sports where you have to support a kid and they're upside down, right? And you've got to take them through skills. And literally the only way you can practice that is by practicing. I think, those were two of the big mistakes that I made very early on. But the big thing about those 8 months was that it gave me that freedom to really develop. I was very good at asking questions. I learned a lot about other coaches as well. I worked with lots of different coaches, and I'd see lots of different approaches. I learned what I want to take from those and what I don't want to do and the way that I want to be. And I think that for me, I really developed my foundations in those first 8 months. My foundations in terms of technically, the way I was going to approach my coaching, but also my philosophy. And I think the way that my technical philosophy for teaching gymnastic skills now is that I teach a technique for 3 reasons. So the reason I teach a specific technique in gymnastics for a skill is, number one, I want to give the gymnast the best possible chance to achieve their maximum difficulty potential. So that's why I'm teaching a technique. Number 2, I want to make sure that they have the best possible chance of performing that skill consistently over a long period of time. So not just once, not just at one competition, they're going to have a real chance of competing that skill 9 times out of 10 successfully. And the third reason is longevity and health. I want to teach them techniques that isn't going to put their body at risk. And over time, they're going to be able to have a better chance at having a long, successful career. So those 3 things, that's really important to me. And every time I'm teaching a kid about a certain technique and a certain skill, I'm really thinking about those 3 things. So I want you to be able to do the maximum potential difficulty you possibly can for this skill. I want you to be able to perform it consistently at competition and in training. And I want to make sure that when you're doing this skill day in, day out, I'm teaching them a technique that is going to give you the best possible chance of not getting injured over the long run. And that's become my framework in terms of technique and the way that I'm teaching skills. And that comes more to like, I guess Sergey taught me what to teach. That's understanding why I'm teaching it, right? I've kind of like learned that, and I developed that over those 8 months. And I think the second part of that is then my philosophy and like why I'm coaching and my approach to coaching. And for me, the reason I love coaching is that, to be honest, I love kids, man. I love that imagination and that sense of just wonder when you come into a gym and wanting to learn something and being very pure, you know, especially when you're teaching like young kids. There's no politics involved at that point. You know, they might be trying to win and they might be trying to get better, but all of that confusion and the chaos and all of that, like that stress, it isn't there at that level, you know. It's very pure. It's why I love gymnastics, why I started in the first place. It's what I felt when I finished, and I enjoy that. And I enjoy trying to give somebody, I like seeing the sense of fulfillment on somebody's face when they've like worked really hard at something and they've pulled it off and it's worked. And you see that smile, you know, like that's what it's about for me. It's not like the medals and winning, and that's great. That's a byproduct. It's more of a, oh wow, like I achieved something. Like I did something really, like I endured something difficult and I worked really hard at it and I didn't give up and then it's worked. Oh my God, this is amazing. What else can I do? It's that idea of, wow, I achieved that and it worked. What can I do next? Like, and for me, I want to always constantly learn in my own life, in my coaching journey when I was an athlete. I always want to learn and get better and progress. I think as humans, we're like wired that way. And my philosophy for coaching has always been that. It's really not, it's what's best for that child and that gymnast. I want to give them the very best of me, and I want to give them the best opportunity to succeed and do what they want to in gymnastics, but also enjoy it and like be happy. And, you know, they're like wishy-washy terms, and happy doesn't mean that they're going to be happy every single day, but I need to be able to ask a gymnast, whether they're 14, 16, 18, 20, if I ask them, do you love what you do? Do you enjoy it? They need to be like, yeah, man, I love it. Like, even the bad, the good and the bad, I love all of it. Like, it's the whole thing that I enjoy. It's not just the standing on the podium with the gold medal at the end of it. I love the process of it. I love trying to figure out how do I work through this injury? How do I get this skill? I've been struggling with it for 3 months now and it's not working. Can I find a different route? I love that exploration of trying to work together. And it should be like a joint effort with me and the gymnast. But there were lots that I learned. And, you know, I said there in the intro that I really think that now my mentor in coaching has become Josh. I think a lot of people would probably think it's Sergey, right? But, you know, Sergey isn't around much for me. He's over in Ireland and he's busy still doing his thing, and he's coaching right at the top of his game. But you know, some of the lessons that Josh has taught me have been incredible. And when I think back to the first one, around that time in those 8 months, I was doing my level 2 qualification. So while I was still training, I'd done my level 1. And at that time, it was more of a fail-safe. It was like, I think this is a smart thing to do, so I'm going to do it. So I went ahead and did my level 1 while I was still training, but had no plans to use it. I just felt like that's probably a good thing to do. You know, I was at the point in my career where I was trying to be smart and I was trying to do the right things, even if I didn't understand again why I was doing them. And then as I was doing the 8 months of coaching, I was like, oh, this is a great time to do my level 2 qualification. I also knew that the level 2 qualification was a gateway for me being able to do my own things outside of being at the gymnastics club. I could do my own gymnastics coaching, whether that was in schools or externally. And we had a session where I was in the group of everybody I was learning this level 2 qualification with. It was the first day. And on these days, you would spend a few hours doing the theory, then you'd get stuck into the practical stuff. And Josh kind of wrote he actually had on the board, he had coach-led and gymnast-led. And he said, right, I want you to stand either over here where it's coach-led, so that means that the coach is leading the program, the coach is dictating what the gymnasts are doing, or it's athlete-led, gymnast-led. So over here, it's gymnasts are leading the program and what they're doing, and they're in control of the gymnastics they're doing. And he said, where do you think you should put yourself on that scale as a coach? How do you think it should work for a young gymnast that's, let's say, 10 years old? And so straight away, I'm trying to, you know, in my head, I'm thinking, and you have to remember, I've just come out of being an athlete and I'm coming out of the back of this kind of Me Too movement in gymnastics. And I'm like, yeah, it's got to be gymnast-led. Gymnast has got to lead the way. And so I've gone and stood to that end. And a lot of people did. A few people stood kind of in the middle, and maybe one or two people stood on the coach-led. And then he asked why. So I gave this kind of like passionate, like, it should be about the gymnast. Like, it's not about the coach. It's not about the results and the medals and all of this kind of stuff. And he said, so are you expecting a 10-year-old to plan their session and know what to do? And I kind of sat back and I was like, that's so obvious. Like, when you're 10 years old, you can't plan your session, design your routines. You don't know what you need to be able to do. And he was like, I'd say it should be way more on the coach led. And I was like, oh, wow. And he said, but as you get older, you start to move down that scale, but it should never be completely athlete led, right? At the end of my career, I had gone back to, Sergey, you take control, tell me what I need to do, because you need a coach, and I stress that to a lot of people now, like athletes are still training. I say, you always need a coach. There are things that you can't see in yourself. You're stuck inside your own head and you're seeing everything from this kind of like first person view, but somebody that can sit on the outside and has watched your training for the last 7 days, they're going to spot little details that you're not going to see. That's really, really important. Everybody needs a coach or a mentor or somebody to help them. You can't do everything on your own, especially in a sport like gymnastics, because you're just going to miss things. It's too complex. There's no way you can do it. You also need somebody to motivate you. You need somebody to support you at times in terms of physically supporting you. So you just can't train by yourself. That never works. And so that was a big learning lesson for me, and that's one thing that Josh taught me. And I think during that time, one thing that I really remember is that Josh was on a UK coaching qualification course. It was like it was an amazing opportunity for him to develop his coaching, and only a few coaches from every Olympic sport get this opportunity every year. Josh was one of them, and he would tell me about these days, and they sound fascinating. They would do a lot of role play work, and one of the things that he said that he worked on and he learned was that he used to be quite emotional early on in his career as a coach, and if a parent came and gave him some feedback, like, he'd take it quite personally if it was negative feedback. And he said, I've been on this coaching development course, and I learned that, if a parent comes in and they're emotional and they've got a frustration and they want to have a conversation, the best thing to do is to sit back and just let them vent and get that out there, and sit back for 10 minutes. And you'll notice that after a few minutes, once they've got it off their chest, they'll then calm down. Then you can come in and talk with them, and then you can have a good conversation. I was like, oh my God, like, that sounds great. But I never needed to use it in those first 8 months because, I did have a group that I would work with, but it was only a few hours a week. We never really had these conversations. But now I have my own gymnastics coaching business at David Lloyd. I do need to deal with parents, and a situation just like that came up very recently, and I probably reacted a little bit emotionally again in the beginning. I took it quite personally, and then on reflection I went back and thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that conversation Josh had, I could have put that into practice there. So yeah, I think I learned a lot about coaching, especially from Josh. Josh taught me a lot. Listening to him, listening to his journey, him telling stories, some of his mistakes that he made. It's super invaluable that time in those first 8 months. And then I think it was time to move on then. At that point, I had learned that coaching in the traditional sense, it just wasn't going to be for me. And I loved it. And I think the big thing that I picked up on was that the fire just wasn't there. I've spoke about this before. I think you need to have that. And one thing Josh had said to me again, this was before I'd finished gymnastics. He'd said, Sam, everybody's got an ego, even Sergey. I sat back and thought about that, and I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. And I think you do need, everybody's got one, and you do need to have one as a coach, right? You have to, because it's a very competitive landscape, and you need to want to improve and get better. And your gymnasts need you to have a bit of an ego too, because they want to improve, and they need you to be constantly pushing yourself and reaching for the top and trying to get that success. And I remember that, and I think for me, that fire in my belly just wasn't there for coaching like it was as an athlete. Not in the traditional sense, to go down that route and make that commitment. So I then went away, we went traveling. I'm glad I tried it. Again, I'd learned what I didn't want to do, but I'd really loved the actual coaching. I had a real passion for it. We spent 4 months traveling, and I started to think about what it was that I wanted to do. And I wanted to use gymnastics as my vehicle to build a life. And, I still wanted to coach, but I'd spent 2 days a week coaching from 4 o'clock until 8:30, doing just recreational gymnastics, like hour after hour. And that's hard to be as motivated in the fourth hour as you are in the first hour, and as enthusiastic about teaching forward rolls and cartwheels, as you're in, fourth day into the week, you've been coaching for 30 hours that week. That's tough. And if you don't have massive inner drive that you're working towards something, you're trying to achieve something as a coach, I don't think you can do that, because you need to have that passion for it. I enjoyed it, but not to the point where I wanted to do that every single day, you know. So I went away, I thought about it, and I decided, right, I do want to coach, but I want to build my own thing. And that was one thing that I learned from working in construction, working for my dad, and then working in gymnastics, was that when you work for somebody else, there's only so much you can do. And I'm somebody that's very creative and has lots of ideas, but ultimately I have to stick within certain parameters, because it's somebody else's business, somebody else's gymnastics club. And for me, I wanted to be in a position where I could bring my own ideas to something, and I wanted to build something from scratch. And so Oldham Gymnastics was born. I spoke to the guys at David Lloyd, and I decided that I was going to bring an Olympic level lens to recreational gymnastics, and I was going to approach it in the same way that I would approach teaching a men's squad that are representing Great Britain. It's going to be the same approach, the same level of detail. Now, they're only going to do an hour a week, so the intensity doesn't need to be the same as those guys. But in terms of what I'm trying to give them, I'm going to try and give them everything that I would give somebody that was competing at the very highest level. I think I learned that from Sergey, you know, seeing the passion that he had, teaching somebody to do their first ever forward roll, and how that was very similar to the teaching myself to do the hardest high bar routine I ever competed in my career. It was very similar. He got the same out of it. He approached that with the same level of enthusiasm. So that was kind of the way I wanted to go about it. And I built my own award scheme. So I have an award scheme called the Olympic Rings Award Scheme. The kids work off 5 different areas. So we have strength, flexibility, balance, power, spatial awareness. And that's what I thought about. I broke gymnastics down into those 5 areas, and very much like fundamentals, working on basics. We work on handstands, forward rolls, cartwheels, flexibility. And it's as much as trying to get kids enthusiastic and passionate about sport, lighting that fire and hoping that that fire then continues to burn for the rest of their young lives and into adulthood, as much it is about teaching them the best gymnastics I can possibly teach them. And I always, when I was at the gym working at Notts, I kind of felt like we should all be trying to teach like the best possible handstand we can, or the best possible forward roll, no matter the level that we're at. And so that's the approach I took, and it's worked really well. I've been doing that for over a year now. Like, I think we're getting on to like 13, 14 months. I have 20 kids that come and do gymnastics with me every single week. It's amazing to see their progress. My first group that I started with back in April last year, those guys are now doing their silver award in my award scheme. So they're working on their second routine. They're doing round-offs, handstands. They're doing jump full turns. They're doing bridge. They're doing tuck levers. So to have seen that over 1 year and the progress they've made in all those 5 areas is just amazing. And I know that from myself and my personal experience, the impact that's had, being able to do body weight training and almost have a good understanding of your body, but a mastery of like what you're capable of doing in all of those areas. It's just huge, man. It puts me at such an advantage when I try different sports now as an adult. Like, I pick them up quite quick because I have a good spatial awareness. I'm flexible. I'll go and do jiu-jitsu and they'll be like, "Oh, you're so flexible, man," or "You've got real good grip strength." So, if I'm so excited for these kids that do gymnastics with me, because they're probably going to do gymnastics with me till they're like 11 or 12 years old, and then they'll probably move on to the next step and they'll do different sports, I imagine. And I feel very proud that I've given them some great foundations. So I really enjoyed that coaching, and some of the things that I learned in those first 8 months have become like my principles. A perfect example is the way that I teach a cartwheel. When I was working at Notts, there were a lot of kids that were struggling to twist, whether it was forwards or backwards. And I started to kind of delve into like, why are you twisting the way you're twisting? So why do you twist left or twist right? And there were a lot of there was a big mismatch between the way that some of the kids were twisting. Sometimes they twist left forwards, right backwards, or right forwards, right backwards. They did a cartwheel on the left but twist right. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I think it's because not a lot of people really focus on that bottom end when they're first getting started. They'll take gymnasts that have got some real natural ability and then they'll work with them. But they don't work at that very bottom level, particularly not the highest level coaches that are really interested in the intricacies of why you're teaching something. And so now when I teach kids, I try to to explain to them. For me, my principles for teaching a cartwheel, which is very fundamental, because any way you turn in gymnastics is kind of based off which way you do your cartwheel. So the way I explain it to kids in a school, or even high-level gymnasts, I've tried to talk about why they're twisting one way forwards and backwards, and why that's potentially a problem moving forwards, in terms of that, again, that technique of teaching them a technique that's going to give them the best possible chance of doing the maximum difficulty in the future. You know, I explain that when you write your name, if you're right-handed, where's your left hand? Your left hand's on the piece of paper. So the right one wants to do the movement, but this one wants to be on the floor. This is the stable one, the strong one. If I was going to kick a ball with my right foot into the top corner, once I've kicked the ball, my left foot is still on the floor. That's a strong one. The right one wants to do the movement. So these two, my right hand and my right foot, want to be in the air when I do the cartwheel, and these two want to be on the floor, and vice versa, the other way around. And I try and stick to those principles. That doesn't mean that I'm not flexible, and I'll change it. If there's a kid at a school that's done a cartwheel already and they're in year 6 and they look at me with panic on their face because I've asked them to do a cartwheel the complete wrong way, and I'll say, don't worry, if you've already learned to do a cartwheel, that's fine. But if you want to try it, like, give it a go, see if it's better. And that's the way I kind of fundamentally teach cartwheels at my gymnastics myself, like Sam Oldham gymnastics coaching, at David Lloyd, or anything that I'm really doing when I'm working in schools. You know, I stick to those technical principles. They're like foundations that I stick to, and they work for me. And I think that's one thing with coaching. Like, there is no right or wrong answer. There are so many different types of technique, and lots of different technique can get you to the same end goal. But I think there's some kind of core things that you have to kind of try and stick to, and I really enjoy it. I love developing my technique of teaching a cartwheel. It's such a basic skill, right? But, you know, I'm constantly learning and finding new ways to teach it. Different preps, different techniques, getting the gymnasts to look in different places, where they're pointing their fingers and their hands, what they're trying to feel. I talk a lot about feel when I do my coaching. So I often say on the parallel bars, for instance, guys, when you're doing your handstand, you need to try and push towards the ceiling. Imagine there's somebody above you trying to pull your toes up towards the ceiling. Like, it's lots of these metaphors that the young kids tend to be able to relate to. Like, oh yeah, what would that feel like? You know, or when you're doing your cartwheel, imagine somebody's pulling your hand to the wall opposite you, so you're stretching out. It's trying to really come up with new ways and like imaginative and visualization type ways for them to see it, because sometimes if you just explain it in black and white, they don't really get it. You quite often see in coaching that, like, your coach will tell you something again and again and again, day in, day out, and then you go to maybe a national training camp and a different coach will say the same thing in a slightly different way, and it will just click like that. So constantly changing and evolving and trying to, and also asking other coaches to, can you take them for this, and can you help them with this cartwheel? That's been really massive for me. And I think, yeah, the Sam Oldham gymnastics coaching and the key fundamentals that I've got, I'm really proud of it. I love it. I think, you know, a real credit to it is that I have quite a low turnover rate. So quite often when the kids come, they stay and they really enjoy it. And that's amazing for me. That means that, yeah, they're seeing the progress, and they're understanding that, you know, we're working hard, but we're enjoying it at the same time. We're having fun and you're learning things. And yeah, I think almost outside of the actual gymnastics, the life skills that you get from sport are just incredibly valuable. Outside of that, you know, I've gone in and done some consultancy work. So I've done gym club visits. Last summer, I went over to Ireland, spent a few days in Ireland. I've been down to some gyms down south, which was amazing. I had the opportunity to do that. And then, you know, we kind of get to the end of last year and I get that call, or we have that meeting with Josh again, and he says, look, Sam, I'd like you to come back to the gym, but this time I want you to specifically work with the men at the top end, which was super exciting for me because, you know, again, I felt incredibly valued. I felt like Josh was, you know, saying, look, I really value your expertise, and I was able to exercise a pocket of knowledge that I hadn't been able to use yet, really, you know. I hadn't used it in my gymnastics coaching at David Lloyd or in schools. I hadn't been able to use it in those first 8 months, but now I was really able to use it with that top level. And I absolutely have loved the last 6 months. It's been amazing. You know, I think my approach in the beginning was, you know, I sat down with Josh and had a conversation. I said, look, Josh, I'm just here to echo whatever you want to teach. Like, you let me know what you want me to do. I'm going to follow the orders. I'm here to learn as well. I want to learn from you. I want to improve myself. I see this as an amazing opportunity, but I also had the self-confidence to back myself. I know that I've got a real good technical knowledge base. And I believe I'm really good at teaching high-level gymnastics in terms of the way I think about skills, the way I break them down, the way I communicate that with the gymnasts. There's a lot that I have to work on too. So a perfect example is my supporting. I'm not great at supporting. And that's partly because I've not had many opportunities to support. And a perfect example of this, again, was the first ever session I did at the start of this year in January. One of the gymnasts asked me to support them for a ring strength sequence, and I was nervous. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna fuck this up." I know. So I stood on the rings ready with it was Hamish at the time, and I think he was doing an Azerian, so a back circle to a Maltese, and then a back kip to a Maltese, and then a Nakayama. So Josh showed me, and I watched him, and again, it's one thing watching someone support something. Then when you stand there, and your hands, you're in place, and they all of a sudden go upside down, and your brain gets so confused. And I completely messed it up and didn't support him, and he fell off, and he was laughing, and I was like, right, at this moment, it was like dropping the little girl again on the A-bars. Either I shy away from this, and when Josh is in the gym, I just let him support it, and when Josh isn't here, I just don't support it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to learn that way. So I made a point of the next session, because Josh was away on the next session, saying to every guy, if you need support on rings, come to me, ask me to do it. I'm probably going to get it wrong in the beginning, but I need to learn, because I don't want you not doing that work because Josh is away. You have to be able to do that work. And so I pushed myself to be able to do it. And now I feel quite comfortable supporting ring strength. I'm fine with it, but that took me a while. And I still messed up a few times. And that was a big lesson for me, but that's a massive lesson that I think young gymnasts should take away. Young coaches, should take away. Because there aren't many opportunities to support. And whenever I've been on I'm now doing my level 3 coaching qualification, and when I'm talking with other young coaches, and they often come, they might listen to the podcast, and they'll come and ask me for their technical feedback, and I say, look, the biggest thing is make sure you're supporting as much as you possibly can, because it's so easy to hide in a gymnastics environment. It's really easy to sit back and just not get hands-on and not support. But if you don't do that, it's going to be a real problem, especially if you're coaching that low level, because it's going to curb the gymnast's potential for learning. It's really going to hinder that skill development. You've got to get support, and they've got to feel what it's like in the air. They have to be in the air. They have to feel safe doing it, and you need to feel comfortable doing it. And the only way you feel comfortable doing it is pushing through and stumbling through feeling uncomfortable. So that's a big lesson for any young coach out there. If you see somebody in the gym supporting a skill that you don't know how to support and you'd like to, just go over and say, hey, can you show me how to do that, and can I have one go? Because the problem is, in gymnastics, as in life, everybody is busy doing their own thing. They've got their own things they need to work on, their own targets, their own goals. In gymnastics, you'll be working with your own group, and it's very hard to find the time to work with other coaches and kind of have the time to mentor other people. And that's one thing that I think just across the board, it's not necessarily in my gym, but in every gym, there's not a lot of mentoring that goes on unless you seek it out. So you have to seek it out. And I think the lesson there is, like, if you don't go and ask, don't expect that person to just come and help you. And you need feedback, right? Especially when you're a young coach, you need somebody to tell you, hey, you're doing a good job, keep going. But you're going to have to go and seek that out. It just isn't going to happen. You know, I've been waiting to see that happen over 2.5 years. It just won't. So you've got to go and seek that out. You've got to take the initiative yourself. If you're passionate about gymnastics coaching, you want to get better and you want to have a good career, you've got to go and seek out that knowledge and that advice. You've got to go and ask for it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So yeah, that'd be a big piece of advice I would give people. But yeah, the opportunity to have worked with that top level has been amazing. I've learned a lot. I'm a massive note taker. So the guys probably wonder what's going in my little book. Every single session I've coached this year with the men's squad, I've written notes, and it's quite often technical feedback. Sometimes it's more like the psychological things and the mindset and the mental approach to their gymnastics. I will write notes and I'll write it down. It's so I can go back and look at it. It's also so I can keep track of, like, if technical feedback and mistakes happen consistently, okay, we really need to look at that and see if we can break it down. And the other thing that I've done, which I think is, I've done this for two reasons. Number one, I'm doing my level 3. I'm going to have to do my level 3 theory. I've heard that it's very long-winded and you need to do a 6-month preparation for a competition. So the fact that I've written these notes every single week for 6 months means that I've got all of that done. All my theory is done. So I just need to put that down. So it was really smart of me, I think, of doing that. I learned from my level 1 and level 2 that if you leave it to the last minute, minute, that theory is very long-winded and it takes as long as it takes. So I've already got all that information. I just kind of need to collate it, which is really cool. And I also wanted to give the gymnasts something back. So after the British Championships, I gave them essentially a PDF of all the technical feedback that cropped up consistently, some of the mindset and mental things that came up that I felt that they'd either done really well or could work on. And then the other thing that I asked them to do was I wanted them to reflect on their own experience of their preparation, and I wanted them to look at technically one thing that they feel like they got right in that preparation, and then one thing that they want to work on moving forward to go to the next level. Now, that wasn't something that they got wrong. I didn't want them to frame it as, right, I really messed up there. I didn't want it to be that. I just wanted it to be something that they could work on moving forwards, that they felt would take their gymnastics to the next level. And I asked them to do that and think about those two things technically, so in terms of the actual gymnastics and the skills they were doing and their technique that they were performing, strategically, so in terms of like the way they approached their preparation, and that might be, right, I started too late in the preparation so I wasn't fit enough, or the construction of my routine, I think that I needed to make a different decision or go a different route. And then mentally, in terms of like their mindset and their approach, I asked them to do that. And then the last thing that was physically, how did they feel? So their strength, their fitness, their capacity, their endurance, and then I gave them back. And then the plan is to do the same thing after they've finished their next competition, which is the British teams in 2 weeks. But I think the big thing about the last 6 months is it's just been amazing to have that opportunity and be given that freedom again to, you know, Josh obviously trusts me technically to coach those gymnasts. What's quite funny is because I'm still doing my level 3 coaching qualification, somebody has to come in the gym to watch me coach because I don't have my level 3. Which is brilliant. So, you know, I understand that the gym almost have to pay me to coach and pay someone to watch me coaching. So I quite understand why that this role that I've got was a short-term thing. I think it worked for everybody. It was great for me. It was great for those gymnasts because I often talk about people like me, retired athletes, not giving that knowledge back. I've tried to give them everything I can. All of my technical feedback, the mental side, my approach, all my mistakes and lessons, I've tried to give them as much as I possibly could. And I think I've really done that. And there's been times where they've been able to take some real value learning. The majority of the things that they've learned is from the mistakes that I've made and the lessons that I've learned in my career. And I also think that, you know, over these 6 months, you know, it's been an amazing opportunity for me to learn as well. So it's great that they're going to finish with the British Team Championships. They've just done really well, those guys. I'm very proud of all of them. They did really well at the London Open. They won 8 medals, I think. Nearly everybody finished within the top 10. An amazing achievement for the club. An amazing achievement for Josh because Josh stepped into Sergei's footsteps in a way, which is a very daunting task. And the way, he won't know this, but on Tuesday, the way that the boys spoke about the job that he's done in the last 12 months, it made me smile. It made me wish that he could hear them talk about that because they said, you know, they're just blown away with the job that he's done. And in the beginning, it was a lot of conditioning work and it was trying to, you know, really steady the ship and be very consistent, be very reliable. And I think that they're the big things that I learned from Josh and his style and his approach to coaching. He never gets flustered. He remains very calm. He's able to make real logical decisions. He doesn't seem anyway on the outside, whether he is internally, externally, he doesn't seem to take the results to heart too much. He's constantly trying to improve. And I think it's a credit to the work that Josh has done that those boys have performed so well. I'm proud that I was able to play a part in that in these 6 months. I'm really excited to see how they do at the British teams. I think they've got a good chance of becoming the British team champions in an Olympic year, which is an amazing achievement. So to have played a small role in that is really cool. It really feels like I've been able to give back. And the other thing as well, you know, Josh has gone on to achieve what most young coaches set out to do when they decide that they want to be a gymnastics coach. He's has a gymnast that's become a junior European champion, which is an incredible achievement. He should be very proud of himself and the job that he's done over the last 12 months. I'm super excited to see the development of that squad over the next few years and the development of the gym. The gym has now just had some new they've had a lot of development going on, so they're going to have an amazing viewing gallery for parents to watch for the first time. That gym, I've always been a critic of the fact that you can't really watch the gymnastics. Parents don't know what's going on. There's going to be an amazing viewing gallery, a new cafe, office, changing rooms, an area for gymnasts to chill out. It's going to be very, very professional. I think it's going to make it, if not the best club gym, one of the best club gyms in the whole of the country. Josh is just, looking at potentially hiring a new coach, somebody to come in and start again at the bottom. A gymnastics club needs to be a constant conveyor belt of gymnasts coming in. That's how it works. You get those gymnasts that come to the end of their career and you want them to come round and give back again, and you want those young gymnasts to come through. So it's really exciting. I'm excited for the future. I think, at the moment, there are probably 4 or 5 core gymnastics clubs in the country that continue to produce results year after year, decade after decade, and they've got long-standing histories. Notts is one of them. It's something I'm very proud of. I'm very proud to be associated with the gym. But yeah, I think my coaching journey over the last 3 years has been incredible. I've learned so much. I've made so many mistakes, and I guess my plans for the future is to continue. What that looks like, I've kind of reached another limbo point where I'm really thinking about, okay, what direction do I want to go in? I still love coaching my gymnastics at David Lloyd, and I'm loving my schoolwork. I've got 13 schools coming up this summer term, which is incredible. I literally have no more time for schools. Any spare time I've got are taken up by doing school events this summer. And the amazing thing is that this year, the majority of them are local and they're in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, which I'm really excited to do. I think with the Paris Olympic Games coming up, that message that I leave those children with is going to hit home even more, because they're going to be able to watch a Great Britain team compete at the Olympic Games in Paris. So I'm super excited about that. I want to continue doing that in the future. But I also want to continue doing the work that I've done and work at that highest level and give back. And I think the podcast is one way that I do that. But I want to work with athletes with ambitions of competing at the highest level, because I think I've got a lot of value and I've got a lot to share. But yeah, I think I'm going to finish this episode. We're going to finish this episode with probably a thank you to the listeners and the supporters. Everybody's been really supporting the solo episodes recently. So the ones that have been specific towards gymnastics, we're going to still keep bringing them. The podcast is doing well. The views are doing well. The numbers are doing well. We've got some great guests lined up in the next few months, especially as we lead into the Olympic Games. A lot of gymnastics-based guests, some athletes that are hopefully going to be competing in Paris, some athletes from the past. So something for everyone. Athletes from the women's side of the sport again. But yeah, we're going to do a giveaway today. So anybody listening to this episode that's made it all the way to the end, thank you for listening. If you could leave us a review on Spotify or on Apple or even on YouTube, it can be on social media. And I just want to hear what your favourite takeaway from any of the episodes that you've listened to so far is. So it could be a solo episode or a guest episode, but one thing that you've taken away that really resonated with you, you found incredibly valuable, and you've used it and maybe you've implemented it in your own gymnastics or your coaching or your own life outside of sport. So yeah, I'm going to go through them, and the giveaway is this. So I got given this by Turner, one of our sponsors. I'm going to leave it in the wrapper, but it's basically a canvas of a picture of me doing a Coleman on high bar in a turn leotard. It's really cool. I'm going to sign it. So I'm going to pick somebody that leaves a really good review on one that's really interesting and engaging. And I'm going to try and get back to everybody that does leave us a review. So yeah, if you can leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, social media, would really appreciate that. And also, please, just a reminder, make sure you're subscribing so you get the episode straight away on a Monday when it's released. And yeah, just thank you for supporting. And yeah, I'm really excited for what's to come for the podcast. I'm starting to be able to get on top of everything now in terms of managing work life and being a dad. And so I'm excited for the future and what the summer's going to bring. So thank you very much. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.